As AI gets smarter and more independent, we're bumping up against this huge question. How do we actually program our own sense of morality into the machines we're building? It's a heck of a challenge, and it forces us to really look in the mirror and figure out what our values even are before we can ever hope to write them into code. So let's dive into how we might even begin to do that. So let's just start with the classic, one that sounds like it's pulled straight from a philosophy final exam. But for AI researchers, this isn't just some thought experiment. This is a real problem they're trying to solve right now. Because for an AI, this isn't hypothetical. It's a potential line of code that could be running in the car driving next to you, probably sooner than you think.
And look, this goes way beyond just self-driving cars, right? As AI systems get more and more autonomy, they're being put in positions to make life or death calls in all sorts of fields. We're talking medical algorithms deciding who gets an organ transplant, or even automated systems on the battlefield. The need to figure this out is getting really urgent.
Now your first thought might be, well, just give the AI some simple rules to follow. Easy enough. But as we're about to see, when you're dealing with something as messy as morality, the simplest answers, well, they almost never work. They tend to fall apart the second they hit the real world.
So the most common sense approach, and kind of the default in a lot of AI research, is a basic form of utilitarianism. The rule is simple: just save the most people. I mean, on the surface, that sounds totally logical. What could possibly go wrong with that?
Well, let's see what happens when you follow that rule to its logical conclusion. This slide just lays it out perfectly. An AI following that simple save the most lives rule would decide it's totally logical to, say, harvest one healthy person's organs to save 5 others. But for us, for humans, our intuition, our gut, just screams that this is horrifyingly wrong. So that's our first huge takeaway. Cold, hard logic just isn't enough. For an AI to be truly moral, it has to get the nuances of human intuition.
So if simple rules are out, what's next? Well, that brings us to the first major framework that researchers are digging into: game theory. It's a powerful way to model how and why we make the decisions we do when we're interacting with each other.
At its core, game theory is basically a mathematical language. It's used to describe situations involving strategy, conflict, and cooperation. You can think of it as a kind of blueprint for making strategic decisions.
All right, to really get a feel for this, let's walk through a classic experiment. It's called the trust game. So picture this. Player 1 gets $100. They can send some of that money, say $50, over to player 2. But on its way, that money gets tripled, so player 2 now has an extra $150. Then it's player 2's move. They can choose to send some of that new, bigger pile of cash back to player 1. It's a really simple, elegant test of trust and fairness.
Now here's what's so fascinating. The cold, hard logic of traditional game theory makes a very clear prediction. It says player 2, acting purely in their own self-interest, will keep all the money and return 0. And player 1, knowing this, would be a fool to send any money in the first place. Logically, the game should never even get started.
But that's not what happens when real people play. In real life, people do trust each other. Player 1 often sends money, and player 2 often sends a fair chunk back. It's just like the researchers point out here. The purely logical game theory solution completely misses the things that make us human. Things like trust, a sense of fairness, and a basic idea of right and wrong.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? Human morality isn't just about calculating the best possible outcome in the future. These traditional models fail because they just can't compute concepts like gratitude for someone's kindness, or that feeling of betrayal when someone acts selfishly. Our ethics look backward at what happened before to decide what to do now, and that's something these simple models just can't handle.
So, this leads us to a second major approach, and it's a completely different way of thinking. Instead of trying to write rules from the top down, what if we could teach an AI about morality from the bottom up? What if we could just show it a ton of examples?
That's the whole idea behind using machine learning for morality. You feed an AI a massive data set of human moral judgments, just thousands and thousands of examples, and you let it figure out the underlying patterns of what we humans think is right and wrong. It's a lot like how a child learns, by watching the world around them.
The process itself is pretty straightforward, at least in theory. You can think of it like a 3-step recipe. First, the researchers break down a moral problem into its key ingredients, or features. Then, they gather a huge amount of data on how real people judge scenarios involving those features. And finally, they use all that data to train the AI to make its own calls.
So what exactly are these key moral features? Well, borrowing from moral psychology, they're the abstract concepts that form the bedrock of our ethics. Things like the Harm/Care Foundation, that's our basic instinct to not want to see others suffer. Or the Fairness Foundation, which is our deep-seated sense of justice. The goal is to get the AI to learn how to weigh all these factors, just like we do, often without even realizing we're doing it.
Okay, so all of this is leading us to a really fascinating and honestly pretty profound possibility. If we can actually teach an AI to understand our morality, could it, one day, become even more moral than we are?
But first, it's really important to see that these two approaches, game theory and machine learning, aren't competitors. They're actually perfect partners. Game theory can provide the structured, logical framework, while machine learning offers the flexibility to learn from all the nuances of real human data. They can actually make each other better.
Which brings us right back to that incredible, provocative question. It really might sound like something straight out of science fiction, but the researchers argue it's a very real possibility that we need to start thinking about.
So why might the answer be yes? Well, there are a couple of big reasons. First, by taking in the moral judgments of thousands or even millions of people, an AI could potentially average out our individual human biases and blind spots. It could arrive at a conclusion that's more consistent and fair than any single one of us could. And second, and this is the really mind-bending part, a machine learning system might be able to spot subtle, deep moral principles hidden in our collective data that we've never been able to consciously articulate ourselves.
And this leaves us with what is perhaps the most difficult question of all. As we start down this road of trying to program morality, we have to make a choice. Whose values do we teach it? Do we pick one culture's ethics? Do we try to find a global average? There is no easy answer here, and it's a conversation that really all of us need to be a part of.